The first time I saw the inside of a galactic summit chamber, I realized exactly how much they underestimated us. They'd stuck our delegation at the far end of the obsidian-tiered forum, like kids invited to a grown-up dinner party. 10 seats, 8 of which were empty. The only 2 occupied were me and Commander Ryland, grizzled, war-scarred, and barely tolerating the fact we weren't allowed to bring sidearms. The rest of our team had been delayed during transit checks, conveniently held up by a customs glitch on the Arventi gate. Glitch, my ass. They didn't want us here on time. That's how the Galactic Concord worked. Elegant, manipulative, and coldly efficient. A federation of 57 interstellar civilizations, each obsessed with hierarchy and diplomacy, but always prepared to level a continent if the talk got boring. We were the new guys. Earth had been contacted just 13 years ago. In galactic terms, we were infants. But infants with a gift they hadn't expected. Language. Not just communication. Persuasion. Humans argue better than we fight. We could turn your own values against you mid-sentence. And today, that was our only weapon. Ryland leaned toward me, voice low. Remember, Lucan, they think we're loud, irrational apes, so make sure we out-talk them, not out-shout them. I got it, Commander. The summit was called to address the Valen expansion, an insectoid empire pushing into neutral zones. Dozens of races were watching, tense. There was talk of sanctions, war, extermination. No one mentioned peace until Earth was invited. It was an insult disguised as a gesture. Let the humans babble peace. It'll make us look more reasonable when we decide to burn the hives. The high speaker of the Lyrathai took the floor first, all silk and posture, with a voice like a wind chime echoing in a cave. I barely listened. Every speech was the same. Controlled condemnation, carefully worded threats, a veneer of morality over raw self-interest. Then they called Earth. Ryland nodded toward the center dais. Time to disappoint them. I stood and walked alone. No guards, no translation drones, just my voice. When I reached the platform, every eye in that ancient, monstrous room turned to me. Alien eyes, cold, amused, curious. I didn't start with greetings, didn't bother with protocol. Instead, I looked directly at the Valen envoy, massive, armored, with jaws twitching, and I said, "We understand war. But you understand hunger, and that makes you dangerous." The chamber shifted. Quiet murmurs. The Valen didn't reply, just stared. I turned, looking at the others. The Concord thinks it holds the moral high ground. You all pat yourselves on the back for forming councils while your fleets grow bigger. You call yourselves peaceful, but your peace depends on fear, on alliances, on leverage. You don't seek peace, you just want control. More murmurs. The Hadresian delegate hissed in offense. A few leaned in, intrigued. The Vithari Prime tilted his long, scaled head. I continued. Humanity learned something after tearing itself apart for centuries. We learned that peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from speaking, from confronting the uncomfortable. You want to talk about the Valen threat? Fine. But ask yourselves, how many of you benefited from their expansion before it reached your doorstep? How many of you sold them weapons? Information? Labor? A ripple through the forum. The Aurelian diplomat stood, shouting in his dialect. Ryland didn't flinch. Neither did I. I raised my voice. Let's not pretend you're angry because the Valen are evil. You're angry because you're not the ones in control of the fire anymore. That got their attention. For the next 20 minutes, I tore through them. Not with anger, not with pride, just truth, facts, questions, doubt. I forced them to look at themselves. No scripts, no advisors, just a human who refused to shut up. When I finished, the silence was heavy. The Valen envoy made a strange sound, like a clicking sigh, and said in perfect English, "We will consider Earth's terms." They didn't agree, not yet, but they'd consider. And that, in this arena, was seismic. I walked back to our corner. Ryland gave me a rare smirk. "Not bad for a hairless monkey." I didn't smile back. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage, from holding back everything I wanted to say, because in the end, this wasn't about peace. It was about making the galaxy realize we were done sitting quietly in the corner. They didn't applaud. Galactic forums didn't do applause, especially not for humans. The silence that followed my speech wasn't respectful. It was calculating, like 100 wolves watching another predator walk into the pack. The real war hadn't begun when I left the dais. It started the moment I sat down again. Ryland leaned toward me with a grunt that could have meant anything. Approval, warning, maybe both. "You rattled their cages," he said under his breath. "Now let's see which one bites first." I exhaled slowly, feeling the heat of too many eyes still fixed on me. All around the chamber, soft tones of conversation hummed in strange frequencies, some not even meant for human ears. Delegates whispered, translated, analyzed. I saw the Cartharis' triple mouths flapping as they repeated my words in their native spittle speak. The Meraxes used scent-based pheromone coding. I'd never understand how they processed dialogue, but their atmosphere pods lit up in pulses of orange and red. They'd all heard me. Now they were wondering what kind of weapon Earth had just dropped in their temple of diplomacy. I didn't give them a speech to win favor. I gave them truth. And in a place like this, truth was dangerous. Ryland stood up without another word and strode out of the chamber. I followed him without hesitation. Behind us, the session resumed with cautious formality. The show would go on, but we'd change the script. We walked through the wide, polished corridors of the Citadel, a space station larger than most planets, with structures stretching vertically in artificial gravity towers, ringed with atmospheres for dozens of species. Everywhere we turned, we passed security drones, archivist drones, and ambassadorial attachés, who didn't even try to hide their glances. We were being watched. That wasn't paranoia, it was protocol. We reached our quarters, bare by Concord standards. No luxuries, no AI, just us and the kind of tension you only feel when someone might be planning your assassination. But it hasn't quite been approved yet. Ryland locked the door, then pulled off his coat, revealing the scars across his neck and collarbone. Old ones. Some healed ugly. That's what 10 years on the Martian Rebellion front did to a man. He'd fought under the old Earth Alliance flag before we ever knew there were aliens watching us. "You were supposed to soften the blow," he said finally. I turned, met his gaze. I wasn't going to play nice with liars. "You think they don't know they're liars?" He sat down hard on the bench beside the wall. "They've been playing this game 1,000 years. Every single species in that room learned to balance on a knife's edge before we even discovered combustion engines. You think some earthborn punk with a fast tongue is going to wake them up?" "No," I said. "I think I can shame them into listening." Ryland stared at me. Then he laughed, but it wasn't the good kind. "You don't shame wolves, Lucan. You bleed them, or you make them bleed each other." He leaned forward, voice low. "You're not wrong. But this isn't about making a speech. This is about survival. You need to know that what you did back there just painted a target on our whole species." I nodded. I knew it already. I just didn't care. "Maybe they need to be scared of us," I said. He narrowed his eyes. "Are you trying to be noble, or just stupid?" "Both," I said, "if that's what it takes." There was a knock at the door. Software polite. The kind of knock that meant danger disguised as diplomacy. Ryland rose silently and opened the door half an inch. On the other side stood a creature I barely recognized. Slender, silken robes. Pale skin with glowing veins of lavender beneath the surface. No mouth, but a voice projected straight into the mind. "Envoy Lucan, my name is Valoran." Ryland frowned. "You're Laerithai?" "Correct. I come with an invitation, and a warning." I stood. "Come in." Valoran entered with impossible grace, like his feet barely touched the floor. No sound, no scent, just presence. He was one of the few delegates who had power and mystery in equal measure, and he'd spoken before me earlier in the chamber. "You upset the balance," he said calmly. "Some will admire it, others will not forgive it." "Let me guess," I said. "You're here to advise caution." He turned his head slightly. No expression, just a shift of thought. "I'm here to suggest that if you want to survive, you must understand what you've truly done. You have used the one thing this conquered fears most." I folded my arms. "And what's that?" "Authenticity," I blinked. Valoran continued. "These halls echo with protocol, deception, and mutual benefit. That is the only language the conquered respects. But you walked in and told them what they already knew, and dared them to admit it." "That's a problem for them," I said. "It becomes a problem for you when truth disrupts profit, when morality threatens hierarchy." Valoran paused. "Your words pierced old alliances. The Valen were never meant to be reasoned with. They were meant to be used as the excuse." I felt the weight of that settle in. "So they never wanted peace," I said. "No," Valoran replied. "They wanted justification." I turned toward Ryland. His jaw was tight. "Let me guess," I muttered. "They hoped we'd make the Valen look worse. Say something emotional, barbaric. Justify wiping them out and then label us idealistic primitives." Ryland nodded slowly. "But you didn't give them that." I gave them the mirror. Valoran moved toward the door. "That's why you must come with me. There are those who heard your words and see value in them. Perhaps not enough to start a revolution, but enough to begin a conversation no one wants to admit needs to happen." Ryland stood. "Is this sanctioned?" "No," Valoran said. "Then it's a trap." Valoran turned to me. "Or it's the only chance you'll have before they silence your voice." He left without waiting for a reply. The silence afterward was suffocating. "You want to go?" Ryland said flatly. "I have to." Ryland shook his head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't just politics. This is galactic chess with pieces older than our entire species. The Valen are the gambit. The Laerithai are kings without thrones. And we're a wild card nobody knows how to play." "That's why we're dangerous," I said. "Because we haven't been domesticated yet." He stared at me a long time. Then, finally, "Take a tracker. And don't trust anyone who offers you a drink." Valoran led me deep into the underlevels of the Citadel, past the ornamented halls, through silent maintenance shafts and old transit tubes that still smelled of machine oil and ozone. We emerged into a chamber unlike anything I'd seen, a private sector not logged in the official maps, a meeting place for the uninvited voices. There were 6 of them, 6 delegates, not rebels, not warriors, diplomats, but not the polished kind. These were the ones who'd been pushed to the fringe, warned not to speak, blacklisted for suggesting things like transparency or re-evaluating old treaties. The galaxy's political ghosts. One of them, a massive figure draped in shadow and cables, spoke first. "You embarrassed the council." "I wasn't trying to," I said. "No," the figure rumbled. "You were trying to tell the truth. That is worse." A thin, skeletal delegate from the Thysery leaned forward. "We've been waiting for someone like you." "Why?" I asked. "You don't even know me." "Because you're human, and humans are still untrained in the art of lying." That drew a low chuckle from the group. Valoran nodded toward me. "They will try to dismiss your speech tomorrow, say it was passion, that you were speaking emotionally. But if you want it to survive, if you want your voice to become more than a memory, you will need allies." I looked around. This wasn't a rebellion. It was something more dangerous. An awakening. And somehow I had become its accidental spark. "All right," I said. "Let's talk." They didn't even wait 24 hours before striking back. The next morning, the official session of the Concord resumed. The summit chamber, once distant and cold, now carried a tension that clung to the air like static. As Ryland and I entered, the room didn't whisper like it had before. It watched. Eyes, heads, appendages, attention, unbroken, direct. Something had changed. And that's when the trap snapped shut. The High Counselor of the Concord, the most artificial, smooth-voiced sack of bones in the galaxy, stood with an air of offended decorum and addressed the forum before the proceedings began. "There has been an unfortunate misrepresentation," he began, his voice soft and regal. "A recent speech given by the human delegation has circulated far beyond its intended context. Inflammatory, dramatic, and unverified, it has led to misunderstandings. We believe this is a regrettable product of cultural inexperience." That stung like acid under the skin. They weren't just calling me a liar. They were rewriting the event in real time, painting my truth as a childish tantrum, something to be forgiven rather than taken seriously. Ryland muttered under his breath, "Brace for the backhand." The High Counselor continued. "In light of this disruption, we suggest a temporary hold on further commentary from the human delegation until formal diplomatic evaluations can determine the extent of their qualifications in matters of interstellar politics." And there it was. The real blow. Silencing us. Not with force, not with weapons, with procedure. I stood without permission. Dozens of heads turned. Some amused, some annoyed, some curious. The High Counselor paused, pretending not to see me. "The Concord recognizes the—" "Lucan Reese of Earth," I interrupted, loud and clear. Silence. And then a mechanical chime, one of the moderators activating an override protocol. Ryland reached toward me, but I held my ground. "I wasn't going to speak," I said, "but since you've accused Earth of being too culturally inexperienced to understand the consequences of speech, let me offer a short lesson." A murmur rippled through the chamber. "In our culture," I said, "when someone tells the truth and the room tries to erase it, we don't call that diplomacy. We call that cowardice." Gasps. Audible ones, even among species without lungs. The moderator's override clicked again, trying to mute me. It failed. "I spoke the truth yesterday, not from ignorance, not from arrogance, but from a place you've all forgotten exists. Conscience. So if the Concord wants to silence me, do it, officially, publicly. Prove to the galaxy that truth is dangerous here." No one moved. The High Counselor stood stiff, barely hiding the twitch in his eyelids. I stepped down without waiting for recognition. Ryland just stared at me like I'd punched God in the mouth and asked for seconds. Later, in the halls beyond the chamber, we moved with purpose. The kind of walk you do when you know people are tracking your every step. Ryland was quiet at first, but I could see the pressure rising behind his eyes. "You think this is about making a statement?" he finally said. "You think you're scaring them with a few sharp words? Lucan, They've been ruling over this sector since before humans knew what stars were. You don't win by out-talking them. You win by surviving them. I'm not trying to win, I said. I'm trying to expose them. And then what? Ryland stopped. They'll turn on us, slowly, surgically, block trade routes, cancel defense agreements, whisper campaigns about Earth being unstable. You don't change the game by shouting at the table. You change it by flipping it when no one's watching. I looked him straight in the eye. Then let them come. But they won't forget us. That's when we saw him. Slumped against the hallway wall just outside our quarters. Ambassador Terran, one of the original Earth diplomats, older than both of us, white hair, shaky breath. His hands trembled like glass in a storm, and his eyes, blood red at the corners. Poison, he gasped. Ryland rushed to him, checked his pulse. Weak. Barely there. Terran grabbed my sleeve. They're not just silencing you. They're erasing us, one by one. His body convulsed once, then went still. We froze. That wasn't diplomacy. That was murder. Ryland rose slowly. Get back inside. Are we going to report this? To who? He snapped. To the same people who killed him? We locked the door. Ryland started tearing apart our travel kit. Pulled out a manual comms device. No network access, no signal tapping. Old Earth tech. Untouchable. He activated it. Code black, he said into the mic. Repeat, code black. Human assets compromised on Concord Prime. Confirm status of all diplomats immediately. Use non-digital relays only. No AI routing. A pause. Then a burst of static. Then a calm voice replied. Code black confirmed. 6 assets unresponsive. Working to confirm. You are cleared for shadow ops under Article 7. Ryland looked at me. We're not at a peace summit anymore. We're at war. We just haven't admitted it yet. That night, I met Valoran again. This time, not in the Citadel. He summoned me to a level I didn't even know existed. A place carved into the hull itself. Stark. Cold. Lit by only the glow of nearby stars through transparent metal. You were not supposed to survive the week, he said. I noticed. You are being hunted now, Lucan. And not just you. Your voice. Then why are you helping me? Valoran walked to the edge of the window, staring into space. My species used to believe in something. Before politics, before diplomacy, before the conquered made us instruments of policy, we believed that words had weight, that truth, when spoken without fear, could shift the course of civilizations. He turned to me. And now you've proven it again. I stepped closer. What do you want from me? To finish what you started, he said. There is a clause in Concord law, rarely invoked, buried, forgotten, but still valid. What clause? Article 22, the Summit of Reckoning. I frowned. Sounds dramatic. It's worse than dramatic. It's real, Valoran explained. If a member delegation, especially a new one, can present evidence that proves systemic deception or political manipulation by a sitting council block, they can invoke Article 22. It forces the conquered to hold a live, unedited session in front of every member civilization's public media stream. A reckoning. One shot, one speech, no edits, no spins, no hidden mics, just raw exposure. But it has to be done in front of the council, Valoran warned, with irrefutable evidence, and it has to be witnessed live. I looked at him. And what's the price? If you fail, he said softly, Earth will be isolated. Every alliance revoked. Trade stripped. Your planet will survive, but it will suffer. Ryland's voice echoed in my mind. You don't change the game by shouting at the table. You change it by flipping it when no one's watching. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was naive. Maybe this was suicide. But maybe, just maybe, this was how you start a revolution. Tell me what I need to do. The idea of triggering Article 22 sounded almost mythical, like summoning a ghost to scare the living. But Valoran wasn't bluffing. He had access to records that weren't supposed to exist, and he brought them to me wrapped in a warning. If you go down this path, you don't walk back. I didn't plan to. The files came in layers. Legal archives, internal communications between conquered leaders, falsified intelligence reports stamped with names I couldn't pronounce. But I understood what they meant. The conquered had known about the Valen's advance years before it became a crisis, and not only did they allow it, they fed it, sold them outdated weapons under the table, leaked border patrol schedules, destabilized frontier planets so they'd need intervention. It was the perfect justification for war. Control through chaos. Valoran handed me a thin crystal storage shard. Everything you need is here. Records, transcripts, proof of coordination, smuggled out piece by piece over decades by diplomats like me. You just need to get it into the light. Where's the source data stored? I asked. He hesitated. The Citadel vaults, level 0. I blinked. That doesn't exist. Exactly. Level 0 was rumor, myth, a deep, cold chamber at the core of the Citadel, supposedly sealed after the last Concordic War, where top-level secrets were kept in full analog. No AI access, no digital mapping, no official entrances. Then how do I get in? Valoran gave a tired smile. By becoming something they never expect. Back at our quarters, Ryland was waiting. He wasn't pacing. That was the first sign something was off. He stood by the window with his arms crossed, motionless. You've been gone 7 hours, he said as I walked in. I had to meet with Valoran. His head turned, but his body didn't. You trust him? No. Good. Because we've got another problem. He threw a small hologrid chip on the table. It lit up, rotating slowly. A captured security feed. I walked closer. It was me. At least it looked like me. Talking with someone in a backroom corridor I'd never seen before. Handing over what looked like the same storage shard Valoran had just given me. What is this? Propaganda, Ryland said. Broadcasted through 2 minor system news channels within the last hour. They're already painting you as a sellout. I watched the fake me shake hands with a shadowy figure. They're claiming you're collaborating with the Valen, that your speech was part of a larger manipulation effort to paralyze the conquered while they advance. My stomach turned. They're making me the excuse, I said. They're making you the scapegoat. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. The council knew, or they suspected. Either way, they were trying to poison the well before I could pour truth into it. They'll use this to block Article 22. Ryland nodded. Or worse, to have you arrested before you ever invoke it. That's when I realized the game had shifted again. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was survival. We worked through the night. Valoran slipped us blueprints, old ones, pre-renovation designs of the Citadel's original frame. Most of it was wrong now, overbuilt or buried. But the base layers matched what little intel Earth's scouts had scraped together in the last decade. There was a shaft, not on any current map. Narrow, maintenance-level access between level 14 and what the Conquered called the base stratum. If level 0 existed, it would be there. Ryland called in a favor, one he never talked about. A woman named Linux met us in the dark corridors, dressed in scavenger rags, speaking through clicks and signs until she saw Ryland and softened just enough to nod. She owes me from Vortis Prime, he muttered, as she pried open a wall panel with tools that looked stolen from 5 different civilizations. She knows what's down there? She doesn't want to, but she's getting us in. The shaft smelled like age, rust and old coolant. No sensors, no lights, just us and the echo of our breathing. I carried the shard Valoran gave me in a chest pouch. If we didn't make it out, Ryland had orders to trigger a dead man broadcast through a backup relay hidden on an Earth freighter docked nearby. But we had to try this live. Otherwise, it would just be another conspiracy theory buried in noise. The lower we went, the colder it got. Our breath started to fog. Lights flickered behind old metal plates. This place wasn't abandoned. It was preserved. We hit level 0 2 hours later. The hallway opened into a vault chamber lined with mechanical storage towers, analog, rotating shelves, some as tall as buildings, locked physically, manually, a world before automation. It wasn't just history, it was the Concord's conscience, locked away in silence. We had 20 minutes before Linux's signal loop failed. I found the tower labeled E147, the one Valoran said held the real records tied to the Valen Alliance. Ryland climbed with me. No drones, no elevators, no shortcuts. We reached the top, pried open the latch, and pulled a dusty file box free. Inside, hard copy documentation, human-readable, dozens of them, stamped, signed, sealed. Minutes blurred. I scanned what I could, snapping micropics with the backup lens implant in my right eye. Ryland stood watch, tension in every muscle. We got out with seconds to spare. And that's when it went to hell. We hit level 10 before the alarm tripped. Not a normal alarm. This was Concord Black protocol. A low-frequency pulse meant to jam comms, scramble nav systems, and lock every door on the level. They'd found us. Ryland shoved me forward. Go loud. Get out. What about you? I'll draw them. I've done it before. No. He grabbed my shoulder, hard. You're the voice now, Lucan, not me. We ran. But Ryland turned down another shaft and disappeared, taking half the pursuit with him. I made it back to the surface levels through a crawl duct and stumbled into our quarters, blood on my knuckles and dirt in my throat. The data crystal was still intact. The shard, the eye captures, the box. It was all real. I loaded the backup relay and prepped for Article 22. But before I could trigger it, before I could do the one thing that might rip this empire's lies wide open, I heard the last thing I wanted to hear. A Concord announcement pinged on every screen. It showed me again. Captured footage. Heavily edited. Twisted. They claimed I had been caught attempting to steal confidential materials from the Summit database, that I had attacked Concord guards, that I was now a fugitive. They gave me 3 hours to surrender. 3 hours before Earth's diplomatic immunity was revoked. Ryland wasn't mentioned, because Ryland never came back. I sat there in the dark, watching my own face on the screen as the countdown began. 3 hours. That's all I had to burn the lie to the ground. I had the shard. I had the proof. I had the voice. And now I had nothing left to lose. I had 3 hours left. That's how long the Concord gave me to surrender myself to authorities before they stripped Earth of diplomatic status and labeled me a rogue actor, a terrorist, a threat to interstellar peace. It was never about silencing me. It was about making sure no one like me ever tried again. And yet, there I was, alone, on a stolen comm channel, sitting in the dark with nothing but a dented terminal, a bag of stolen files, and a voice that wouldn't shut up. I could still feel Ryland's hand on my shoulder, could still hear his last words in the echo of the shaft. You're the voice now. Not me. Damn him. But he was right. I opened the shard. Valoran's files, the eye captures, The hard copies. I loaded everything into the secured broadcast protocol, a bypass route embedded in Earth's embassy ship. The only way to trigger Article 22 was to do it through a legal channel, and in full public view. There were no second takes, no hidden edits. The Concord's rulebook was crystal clear. If a delegation invoked Article 22 with sufficient evidence of system-wide corruption, the summit had to stop. Every delegate would be locked into a live stream, visible to every connected world, every citizen in the Concord, every planet, colony, trade outpost, farming world, mining rig, orbital city. Billions. Once I triggered the signal, there was no going back. I had to make my case in one speech, and it had to be more than anger. It had to be truth they couldn't unhear. It took me 47 minutes to build the speech, not from scratch, but from fire. I didn't waste time with greetings. There was no space for tradition or formality. That was the language of the Concord, slow suffocation wrapped in silver. This question mark, this needed to bleed. At 1 hour and 13 minutes left, I loaded the transmission file. At 1 hour and 8 minutes left, I initiated the Article 22 trigger through the Earth diplomatic relay. The Concord responded in less than 60 seconds. Their systems lit up. I saw a flashing cascade on the screen, protocol override requests, encryption layers failing. Then the blue-tinted sigil of the Concord blinked onto the terminal. Article 22 initiated by Earth. Immediate lock required. All member states connecting. No halts, no edits. They'd tried to stall me, but they were too late. The stream went live. I don't remember the exact moment my face appeared across the galaxy, but I remember what I felt. Not fear, conviction, and fury. The broadcast was raw, my voice, my face, unpolished, no special effects, no music, just a man in a dark room speaking to the most powerful alliance of civilizations in known space. And I began like this. My name is Lucan Reese. I speak for Earth, not as its leader, not as a diplomat, not even as a soldier. I speak as a human being who watched you turn peace into performance, who saw how you turned war into a tool to tighten your grip. I speak now because I have no choice, and neither do you. I paused just once, enough to make them sit up. This isn't a plea for unity, this is an indictment. You created a lie, wrapped it in procedure, and called it order. You let the Valen expand while you sold them weapons. You destabilized border systems while claiming to protect them. You fueled a war you now pretend to condemn. You watched colonies burn. You watched refugees drown in vacuum. You watched innocent people get slaughtered on mining stations that you yourself sabotaged, because chaos breeds control. And when someone spoke up, you made them disappear. I dropped the files into the stream. Not just claims, proof, contracts, memos, videos, dead diplomats' voices, Ryland's capture feed, Valoran's documents, the Valen communication logs showing coordination with Concord Council members. I exposed it all, and I didn't stop there. You call Earth uncivilized, too young, too emotional, but let me ask you something. When was the last time any of you told the truth without being forced? We're not perfect, far from it. But we still believe that truth matters. That peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of honesty. And we won't be quiet just because we're new to your game. This is the reckoning you tried to bury. This is Article 22. And now, the galaxy gets to watch you squirm. The reaction wasn't slow. The stream was active for less than 3 minutes before I saw panic ripple across the interstellar grid. Comm towers jammed. Concord servers surged. Thousands of worlds watched as their proud alliance cracked like ice under a floodlight. I saw a delegate from the Carthari Confederacy demand a full tribunal. I saw the Vithari military wing cut ties live on the feed. I saw colonies on the Rim planet send messages of support. And then they cut the stream. Not because of protocol, because they couldn't afford for me to keep talking. But it was too late. The fire had caught. Valoran met me at the fallback point, one of the abandoned emergency hatches near the edge of the diplomatic ring. He looked different this time. Not regal, not composed. Hollow. "The stream is spreading," he said. "They can't stop it. Too many backup relays, too many eyes." I nodded. "Ryland?" Valoran looked away. "They say he died resisting arrest." I clenched my fists, not from surprise, from confirmation. He'd known what was coming. He walked into the trap to give me a window. "He saved you," Valoran said softly. "That's more than most people will ever do." I looked up at him. "What now?" "You leave. Leave. You won't survive here. The Concord will collapse, eventually. Not today, not next week. But what you started can't be stopped now. Their secrets are out. Their unity is broken. But there will be retaliation." I stared out the viewport at the Citadel, the perfect crown of a broken empire. "You think they'll let Earth live?" "They'll try to punish you, blame you, turn your words into noise. But they can't put the fire back in the box." He handed me a disc. Old school, heavy. "What's this?" "A record? Everything you did? Your speech? The stream? The files? It's encoded with 27 mirror beacons. In case they try to erase it. In case they try to erase you." I boarded a non-registered cargo freighter bound for the rim. No escort, no flag. Just me, my voice, and the truth that now had a galaxy's attention. The captain didn't ask who I was. Didn't need to. He just looked at me and said, "You're the guy who pissed off the entire Concord, huh?" I didn't answer. Didn't have to. 3 weeks later, a riot broke out on Drawhill Prime when local media played my full speech. 4 days after that, 2 Concord councilors resigned. 6 months later, the Valen and a cluster of outer colonies signed the first unauthorized peace treaty in modern galactic history. They called it the Lucan Accord. I didn't ask for the name, didn't want it. But I'd earned it. Not with weapons, not with fleets, with words. And the galaxy was still listening. We thought truth would be enough. For about a week, Earth glowed with pride. The media back home replayed my speech like it was a war victory. Commentators called it the moment humanity arrived on the galactic stage. They printed T-shirts with my name on them. Statues were proposed. But all of that was just noise. Because under the celebration, something darker brewed. And then the retaliation began. It started subtle. First, 4 trade agreements were suspended. Then Earth's ambassador on Denari 9 was expelled. Rumors surfaced that entire shipping lanes had been flagged unstable by Concord patrols, which meant no insurance, no protection, and 0 aid if something went wrong. Earth's access to the galactic financial system was under review. Our lunar satellite defense network was temporarily restricted. Our diplomatic clearances were in question. They never said the words directly, but everyone could read between the lines. We were being strangled, not with guns, with systems, with leverage, with cold, bureaucratic vengeance. I landed back on Earth in a disguised freighter, wearing a plain jacket and a pair of dark glasses like some failed movie cliché. No escort, no welcoming committee, just a quiet, backdoor drop into a planet that was on fire without even realizing it. The first thing I saw when I touched down in the old Geneva sector was a protest. Thousands packed the plaza. Not against me, for me. They chanted my name. They held signs that read, "Truth doesn't need permission." They shouted for transparency, for accountability, for Earth to stand on its own feet and stop playing by alien rules. At first, I felt pride. Then I saw something else. Armed men, not soldiers, not security, paramilitaries, privately funded, Unmarked gear, moving through the crowd, not dispersing it, but watching it. Someone had already taken my name and turned it into a flag. A weapon. That's when I realized I wasn't just a symbol anymore. I was leverage. And someone, maybe a lot of someone's, planned to use me however they wanted. I stayed underground. A friend of Ryland's, an old war medic named Niels, smuggled me to an off-grid safe house north of the Siberian Rift. There were no satellites in range, no active AI systems, just snow, silence, and a solar-powered transmitter buried under 6 feet of ice. I tried reaching Valoran twice. No reply. Tried accessing the backup relay systems we'd set up in the Belt colonies. Offline. Ryland's name had been erased from the official Concord casualty logs. Not listed as dead. Not listed as anything. Vanished. The machine was cleaning up the mess. I spent my nights recording voice messages, encrypting evidence, sending backups to the few off-world allies who still answered my calls. Some, like the Vithari, responded with sympathy and silence. Others, like the Meraxi League, offered veiled thanks and warned me to stop talking. Only one delegate sent a reply with full confirmation. "We hear you. We move soon." No name, no seal, just those words. I didn't know whether to be hopeful or afraid. 3 weeks after I returned to Earth, the first bomb went off. Not in some backwater colony, in EarthGov's central archives in Cape Gibraltar. No survivors, hundreds dead, thousands of diplomatic records reduced to ash. The attack was blamed on a radical Earth First group calling itself The Voice. They used my face in their recruitment vids, quoted my speech out of context, spliced together segments to make it sound like I'd called for violent uprising. I never told anyone to pick up a weapon. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. The truth had mutated. What I had ignited wasn't a clean rebellion. It was a movement with 1,000 heads, and not all of them cared about justice. Niels came to me one night with a rusted datapad. No net connection, just local files. "There's someone in the South African Protectorate," he said. "Name's Dyron." "Who is he?" "Used to work for the Concord's Shadow Commission, ran PSYOPs and media containment, until he disappeared 5 years ago." "Disappeared?" "Concord said he defected, started leaking files." I raised an eyebrow. "So he's a ghost." "He's your kind of ghost, and he wants to talk." Dyron lived inside an abandoned weather tower, surrounded by radioactive dunes and broken solar panels. Getting there took 2 fake passports, 3 bribes, and a stolen sandcrawler that nearly fell apart halfway through the trip. When I finally reached him, he was drinking from a copper flask and staring at an old vid screen playing static. "You're not what I expected," he said without looking at me. "Neither are you," I replied. He gestured to the seat across from him. "They'll try to kill you a dozen more times before this is over. I admire your nerve." "I'm not here for admiration." He turned to me, one eye cybernetic, flickering like a candle, the other bloodshot and tired. "You're here because you thought you were fighting liars, but now you're learning the truth isn't clean." "Explain." He tapped his temple. "I ran information warfare for 10 years, helped bury entire uprisings in rumor and fake footage. Do you know what I learned?" "What?" "That the most dangerous thing you can give people is a cause without structure." He pulled up a holofile. Images of the Voice, recruitment hubs, militia growth charts, satellite heat maps showing armed groups across 3 continents and 2 orbital stations. "They're building armies in your name, Lucan, whether you want them to or not. They're not mine. Doesn't matter. Symbols don't have owners, not once they go viral." I looked at the maps, the blood trails, the bombings. "This wasn't what I wanted," I muttered. "It never is," Dyron said. "But now the fire's burning. You have 2 choices. Let it consume everything, or start building walls before it does." And how do I do that? He smiled for the first time. You give the galaxy something better to follow. We started broadcasting again, but not like before. No speeches, no threats, no grand declarations, just conversations. Real ones. Dyron helped me link into shadow relays that bounced between dead satellites and abandoned space stations. We hijacked news feeds on outer colonies. We sent encoded messages through Trader Guild networks. Each one carried stories. Not mine. Theirs. A Valen mother who lost her hive to a Concord bombing, and never knew why. A Carthari whistleblower who'd been imprisoned for leaking a trade deal that killed an entire ocean world. A human diplomat who admitted she'd watched Concord counselors rewrite casualty logs to hide corporate negligence. We gave them truth again. But this time, we didn't wrap it in anger. We wrapped it in clarity, and the fires started to change. Some militias disbanded. Some turned their weapons inward, on the politicians who had used the chaos for gain. Protests began to demand structure, representation, nonviolent resistance. And then, the Concord responded again, with something worse than a weapon, with a narrative. They built a new version of me, not with fake footage, but with truth, repackaged. They said I'd lied to Earth, that I'd staged the speech, that Valoran was a known political radical with a history of manipulating elections. They released footage of Ryland in custody, cooperating with Concord security. Even I couldn't tell if it was real. They used my own evidence to claim that Earth was trying to fracture the Concord to make room for a human empire. Suddenly, I was no longer a symbol of justice. I was a threat to galactic unity. And worse? People started to believe it, because truth wasn't enough anymore. Now, it was about control of the story. That night, Diren came to me holding a bottle of ancient Earth whiskey. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Every day. And would you do it again?" "Twice as loud." He nodded. Then he said something that stuck with me forever. "You shook a 1,000-year-old empire with nothing but your voice. That's not weakness. That's legacy. But legacies aren't clean. They bleed. They burn. You wanted to be a truth teller. Now you have to be a guardian of meaning. Otherwise, they'll twist everything you did into a myth." The next day, someone tried to kill me again. I survived. But Niels didn't. The bullet was meant for me. It hit him instead. He died in my arms, whispering one word: "Keep going." There was a time I thought I'd live to see what came next. That maybe, if I fought hard enough, if I told the truth, loudly, clearly, with evidence stacked sky high, they'd have no choice but to listen, to change, to tear it all down and build something better. But then Niels bled out in my arms, and I stopped believing in happy endings. His death wasn't strategic, it wasn't symbolic, it was random, cruel, and senseless. A cheap bullet meant for me. Fired by a half-trained loyalist who didn't even know why he was pulling the trigger, only that he'd been told I was dangerous. And just like that, another man who believed in something died because of me. Diren and I buried him under the frost line before the drones could ping our position. No names, no gravestone, just a patch of dirt we marked with a scorched EarthGov pin. Niels' last rank still etched on the metal, even after decades of neglect. Diren didn't speak during the burial, neither did I. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been screamed across space. We relocated again. This time to the Kuiper Belt, far enough from Earth, close enough to still transmit. A mining freighter called the Hollowbird picked us up under the guise of scrap traders. The captain, an old Martian woman named Brana, didn't flinch when she saw me. "You're the bastard who made half the galaxy wake up," she said, lighting a thin cigar. "You'd better not get us killed." "I'll try," I told her. She snorted. "Don't." From the frozen outskirts of the system, we started seeing the fractures take form. It began with the Vithari defection. The Vithari High Circle, previously one of the most loyal pillars of the Conquered, declared its neutrality. They shut down all Conquered trade stations on their worlds, pulled out of mutual defense pacts, released a public statement that simply said, "A truth ignored becomes a fire fed. We will no longer feed it." A week later, the Lyrathai, the same race Valoran belonged to, announced a cultural audit of their council seats. 3 resigned within the hour. A 4th was tried on charges of historical manipulation. The cracks weren't rumors anymore. They were headlines. But the Conquered didn't crumble. It dug in. They pushed harder than ever. They declared an official era of stabilization. A nice way of saying, shut up or get erased. The voice movement fractured into pieces. Some splinter cells began attacking Conquered diplomatic vessels. Others refused to speak at all unless I was physically present. It didn't matter that I'd condemned them. They used my name anyway. And with every bombing, every hostage video, every colony that fell into chaos, the Conquered painted me as the root cause. They called it the human error, they called it the broadcast plague, the Lucan virus. And back home, Earth started listening. President Avers, Earth's newly elected figurehead, made her position clear in her first address. We honor Lucan Reese for what he exposed, but we will not let his chaos define our future. Earth will rebuild its standing through order, diplomacy, and cooperation with our interstellar allies. A polite way of saying, he served his purpose, now bury him. I didn't blame her. She had a planet to feed, colonies to protect, and the Conquered was squeezing Earth harder every day. Her choice was survival. Mine was something else entirely. We intercepted a Conquered communication 2 days after the speech. Encrypted, fractured, bounced off a Martian listening satellite still powered by emergency batteries from the corporate war days. It was short, but deadly clear. Subject Reese is now Class 7 threat level. Detain on site. Terminate if necessary. No legal accountability. It was signed by someone I recognized. Ambassador Talek Dor. He'd stood behind the High Counselor during my original speech. Smug. Silent. Disdain radiating off him like poison perfume. According to Valoran, Dor was one of the architects behind the Valen containment plan, and the quiet extermination of thousands of border world civilians. He'd stayed in the shadows when I lit the fire. Now he was stepping into the spotlight to snuff it out. Diran found him first. Dor's making a move, he said, dropping a file into my lap. It was an itinerary. Security schedules, trade summit appearances. Dor would be on Arcesian Station, a luxury trade hub orbiting the gas world Tenver 4, under diplomatic immunity. Do you want him dead? Diran asked. I shook my head. I want him recorded. Getting onto Arcesian Station wasn't the problem. It was leaving that would be. Brana got us through with a forged docking manifest. Diran sliced a hidden maintenance shaft to bypass scans. I wore a courier uniform that still reeked of coolant and melted plastic. I walked into the diplomatic lobby like I belonged there. Dor was seated on a velvet bench, speaking to a handler, sipping green Conquered wine like nothing in the galaxy bothered him. It took everything in me not to break his jaw. Instead, I sat beside him. He didn't look at me. Just sighed. I was wondering when you'd show up. You've been hunting me. I've been cleaning your mess. I looked around. No guards, no guns drawn, just 2 men talking in the middle of a golden cage. You were part of the plan, he said casually. You were supposed to scream, make a scene, stir the pot. Earth would get its headlines. The Conquered would use the chaos to lock down the border worlds again. Everybody wins. He turned to face me. But then you went off script. I didn't speak. You were never supposed to mean it. That was your mistake. I exposed the truth, I said. No, Dor replied. You weaponized it, and now you think you can control the fallout? I pulled a small recorder from my sleeve and pressed it against his wrist. Already got what I needed? His smile faded, but only for a second. Then he laughed. You think anyone's going to believe you now? They don't have to believe me, I said. They just have to believe you. We didn't make it out clean. Concord agents cornered us before we reached the freighter. Darren was shot in the leg. I took a hit to the ribs. Non-lethal, but enough to remind me I was still made of blood and bone. Brana fired every weapon her ship had just to punch through the blockade. We barely escaped, but we had the recording. And for once, it was unfiltered. The day it aired, 2 more conquered species filed for withdrawal. 4 colonies declared independent neutrality. And 100 million people saw Ambassador Talek Dor admit, without shame, that truth had always been a tool, a distraction, a leash. That was the day I realized something terrifying. I was no longer alone. I wasn't even at the center anymore. There were dozens, maybe hundreds like me now, speaking, recording, leaking, rising. The Concord was cracking. But so was everything else. I stood in the Hollowbird's viewing deck that night, looking out over the gas fields of Tenvar 4 as we slipped into dark space. Diren hobbled beside me, leg wrapped in synth flesh. You won, he said. No, I replied. I just survived. He nodded. Then he looked at me and said, The question now is, how much more of you is left to give? And I didn't have an answer, because part of me, the part that still believed in simple truths, had already died with Niels. They say revolutions are born in fire. That's a lie. Fire is what comes after. Revolutions? They're born in silence, the kind where people look at the world and realize something is deeply wrong. But no one says it out loud, not until someone does. And by then, it's too late to take it back. That's what I did. I spoke. And the galaxy caught fire. Now, I was out of places to run. The Concord was dying, but it hadn't fallen. Not yet. It had shrunk, yes, it had fractured. 4 major member species had withdrawn. 2 of its own military arms were engaged in internal mutinies. A full third of its outer colonies were now refusing taxes and refusing orders. But the core, the old council, the machine at the center of it all, still alive, still pulling levers. And now they were preparing for reconstruction. A summit had been called. Not like the one I first spoke at. This one was for the survivors. Those still loyal to the Concord system were converging on Asurian Station, a former archive base converted into a political sanctuary. There, they would decide how to reshape the galaxy, and how to rewrite the last 2 years of chaos into something more comfortable. That meant rewriting me. Diren said it before I did. They're going to paint you as the villain in the history books. Already have, I replied, but now they want to make it permanent. They had 3 objectives. Declare Earth politically unstable. Nullify the Lucan Accords signed by border colonies and neutral species. Draft a new version of events that made the rebellion look like a temporary terrorist movement. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were trying to rebuild their empire from the ashes of the truth. And I couldn't let that happen. We weren't alone. Over the last few months, people had risen. Quietly, loudly, in protest and in war. Some had formed peaceful alliances. Others had shed blood. It wasn't clean. It was never clean. But it was real. We had 2 advantages now. A growing network of colonies that no longer trusted the Conquered, and a leak inside Asurian. Her name was Myla Rez, former Conquered intelligence analyst. She'd defected after watching her own homeworld be used as leverage in a trade deal that cost 1 million lives. Now she was inside, hidden in plain sight, feeding us schedules and personnel lists. and she'd just confirmed what we feared. Lucan, they're drafting the new narrative now. They'll present it in front of the full Loyalist Council in 72 hours. If no one objects, it becomes official Concord history. The lie would become law. Truth would be buried, and I would be branded the madman who nearly broke the galaxy. Unless I stopped it. There was only one way in. Asuryan's diplomatic network was completely locked down. No foreign signals, no outer world delegates. They weren't just closing ranks. They were building a vault of lies and sealing themselves inside. So we hijacked a diplomatic cruiser. It was a suicide mission, and we knew it. But I didn't care. Diren didn't argue this time. He just loaded up the broadcast gear and said, "Let's go." We hit Asuryan's perimeter in a dead zone. No weapon signatures, no active patrols. The station floated in the black like a forgotten ruin, its rings slowly turning, solar shields flashing like dull teeth. The cruiser's ID was still clean. It hadn't been flagged yet. We docked. Security didn't respond. And for a moment I wondered if this was all a trap. It was worse. They didn't think I'd come. We entered the summit chamber on foot. No guns, no guards, just a recording drone behind me and a direct relay line connected to the colony networks that had supported the movement since day one. It was time for one final broadcast. They tried to cut it. They failed. Because Mila had disabled the suppression grid from inside. One chance. One moment. One last speech. The chamber was nearly identical to the one I'd spoken in 2 years ago. Cold tears, elegant silence. 78 delegates seated in layered rings. All of them turned when I entered. Some shocked, some disgusted, some afraid. "Lucan Reese," one of the counselors hissed. "You are not authorized to—" I stepped up to the central platform. I didn't ask permission, because the truth never needed permission. And I began, "You're not here to rebuild peace. You're here to build control, again, just like before. I know the plan, I know the speech, I know the exact words you'll use to bury the last 2 years under a layer of shiny rhetoric and vague regret. You'll call it the Concord Reformation. You'll say it's a return to order, a reaffirmation of unity. You'll pretend you never sold out your own citizens. You'll pretend the blood on your hands was an accident, a necessary cost. And when the new textbooks are printed, you'll write me in as a fanatic, a disruptor, a radical, but here's what you'll never erase. The fact that you heard me. 2 years ago, I stood in a chamber just like this and told the truth. Not because I wanted power, not because I wanted war, but because the silence had gone on too long. You couldn't control that moment. And you won't control this one. I activated the drone. It wasn't just a camera. It was a conduit, broadcasting in real time to over 600 colony worlds, to every civilian relay we'd connected, every neutral species who'd broken ties, every voice that had been ignored for too long. They were watching, listening, not just to me, but to what came next. I took a breath. This isn't about me anymore. It's about who gets to decide what truth means. You've weaponized lies for centuries, buried every voice that didn't serve your version of stability. You killed my friends. You crushed entire planets under red tape and regulations. You sold morality like it was a trade good. But truth doesn't die just because you stop acknowledging it. It grows. And it's growing now. I looked up at the delegates. Most wouldn't meet my eyes. The High Counselor was silent. So were his new advisors. They knew the war was already lost. Now they were just trying to control the story. But I had beaten them to the punch. I ended the broadcast with one sentence, one line that I hadn't prepared, that came straight from the place inside me that had never healed. The truth will never be polite again. The room erupted after I stepped down. Some shouted, some screamed, some tried to detain me, but none of them touched me, because the people watching, They weren't afraid of the Concord anymore. They were afraid of silence. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, 6 more member states suspended their Concord ties. EarthGov, under massive pressure, formally backed the Lucan Accords and began negotiations with independent colonies. Protests exploded across half the core planets. And Mila? She leaked the summit draft speech, the one written to bury everything. It was over. The Concord didn't collapse in fire. It rotted in full view. And that's how it died. I disappeared after that. Diren went dark. Brana left for the outer sectors. Mila vanished into the fold, where the colonists had begun building something new. And me? I became a rumor. A name etched into walls, whispered across borders, painted on broken flags. Some said I'd died. Some said I'd escaped to another galaxy. But the truth? I just got tired. Of running, of fighting, of watching people die just to prove a point. So I left. But not before recording one last message. Not a broadcast, not a speech, a whisper, for whoever came next. Don't make me your hero, don't make me your god. If you want peace, earn it. If you want truth, protect it. And if you want to change the galaxy, then speak. Somewhere, on a colony no one's mapped yet, a kid will find that message one day. Maybe they'll be scared. Maybe they'll be angry. But maybe, just maybe, they'll understand what I meant. Because I didn't want to be remembered. I wanted the silence to end. And it did. Because we spoke.